Do you understand why I pulled you over tonight, sir? I need you to stay right here.
Yes, officer. We were just heading home.
Is there a problem?
It's okay, guys. Everything is gonna be fine. Just stay right here with me.
The red and blue lights cut the evening in half. Marcus Hale eased his SUV to the curb, hands steady on the wheel, breath slow the way he taught his kids when panic crept in. In the back seat, his daughter Naomi pressed her forehead to glass. His son Caleb clutched a toy gavel, the plastic crack from years of pretend courtrooms on the living room floor. The officer approached like a shadow would wait, boots scraping gravel, flashlight beams sliding across Marcus's face, lingering. Too long. Step out of the vehicle, the officer said, voice flat, already decided. Marcus complied. He always did. The air smelled like hot asphalt and cut grass. Somewhere a dog barked. Naomi's door clicked, then froze. "Dad," she whispered. "Stay buckled," Marcus said without turning. He felt the officer's eyes on his hands, on his skin, on the calm that people mistook for guilt. "Why are you nervous?" the officer asked. "I'm not," Marcus replied. The flashlight snapped to his chest, to the small gold pin on his lapel. Misread, dismissed. The officer smirked and glanced into backseat. "Teaching your kids how to get away with things early," he said. The words landed like a blade, sharp and casual. Marcus felt something crack, not loud, not visible, but deep. He thought of courtrooms and constitutions, of promises written in ink that never seemed to dry for people like him. "Hands on the hood," the officer ordered. Marcus obeyed. Behind him, Naomi began to cry, and the officer reached for his cuffs. Marcus Hale noticed a patrol car before it noticed him. It sat angled at the corner like it had always been there, watching the neighborhood learn how to breathe around it. Marcus slowed anyway. He checked his speed, his mirrors, the quiet in the back seat. Naomi was humming. Caleb was tapping his toy gavel against his knee. The lights came on. Marcus pulled over without hesitation. He lowered the window, shut off the engine, and placed his hands on the steering wheel. The routine lived in his muscles. He felt his heart rate change, not spike, tighten. "Everyone okay back there?" he asked softly. Naomi nodded. Caleb didn't answer. The officer approached fast, hand resting near his belt. Flashlight already up though the sun hadn't fully set. The beam swept the interior, paused on Marcus's face, then dipped to the kids. License and registration. The officer said. Marcus handed them over. "May I ask why I was stopped, officer?" The officer glanced at the documents, then back at Marcus. "You look nervous." "I don't believe I was," Marcus said evenly. The officer smiled without warmth. "Step out of the vehicle." Marcus did. Gravel crunched under his shoes. The air smelled like exhaust and heat. He felt the officer stand too close. "Hands where I can see them," the officer said. "They are," Marcus replied. The officer leaned in, voice low. "You got anything I should know about?" "No." "Any warrants? Weapons? Drugs?" "No." The officer circled him slowly, like time was just a waste. "Where you coming from?" "Home." "And before that?" "My office." "What do you do?" Marcus paused. "I'm an attorney." The officer snorted. "Of course you are." From the car, Naomi's door creaked open an inch, then stopped. "Stay inside," Marcus said, sharper than he meant. The officer turned toward the sound. "Sir, tell your kids to stay put." "I just did." The officer's jaw tightened. "Don't get smart." "I'm not," Marcus said. "I'm being careful." The officer's flashlight snapped to Marcus's chest, to the small gold pin on his lapel. He flicked it with a finger. "What's this?" he asked. "A gift," Marcus said. The officer shrugged. "Looks expensive." "It isn't relevant." The officer's eyes hardened. He stepped back and raised his voice so the street could hear. "You match the description of a suspect." Marcus felt the words hit like cold water. "What suspect?" The officer didn't answer. He walked the patrol car, spoke briefly into his radio, then returned. "Turn around," he said. "Hands on the hood." "Am I being detained?" Marcus asked. The officer smiled again. "Do it." Marcus turned. The hood was hot under his palms. He could hear Naomi crying now, soft at first, then louder. "Daddy," she called. "Stay buckled," Marcus said, forcing calm into every syllable. The officer leaned close. "You should have taught them better." "Taught them what?" Marcus asked. "How to behave," the officer said. "How not to look guilty." Marcus closed his eyes. In his mind, he saw courtrooms, transcripts, precedents. None of them fit here. The officer reached for his cuffs. Metal clicked. Marcus felt the sound travel through him, into places words couldn't reach. A neighbor stood on a porch across the street, phone raised but unmoving. The patrol car door opened, and the street went quiet. The house was too quiet when they got home. Marcus noticed it immediately. The way sound seemed to flatten against the walls, the way even the refrigerator hummed like it was holding its breath. Naomi slipped off her shoes without being told. Caleb carried his backpack to the couch and left it there, unopened, like a thing that had betrayed him. Marcus locked the door. Then he unlocked it. Then he locked it again. "Can we watch something?" Naomi asked, her voice careful, as if volume itself might invite trouble back inside. "In a minute," Marcus said. He crouched to her level. "Why don't you and Caleb wash your hands first?" They obeyed. They always did. From the kitchen sink, water ran too long. Naomi scrubbed like she was trying to erase something. Caleb stood beside her, staring at his hands as if they no longer belonged to him. Marcus leaned against the counter and watched them. He wanted to say something that would fix the night, something that would rewind it. He wanted to explain the law in clean lines, to tell them that rules existed for a reason, and that people followed them. But he had stood on the side of the road with his hands on a hood and watched those rules bend. "Daddy," Caleb said suddenly, "did you do something wrong?" The question hit Marcus harder than the cuffs had. "No," he said, "I didn't." Caleb frowned. "Then why did he?" Marcus held up a hand. He needed a second. He inhaled slowly, the way he did before oral arguments, before questions designed to corner him. "Sometimes," Marcus said, choosing each word like a cut glass, "people make decisions about others before they know them." Naomi dried her hands and turned. "Because you're black?" The word hung there, unpolished, honest. Marcus didn't correct her. He didn't soften it. He nodded once. "Sometimes, yes." Naomi's eyes filled, not with confusion this time, but with something sharper. "That's not fair." "No," Marcus said. "It isn't." They sat at the kitchen table with bowls of cereal that went soggy before anyone touched them. Caleb pushed his spoon back and forth, tracing lines through milk. Why didn't the other people help? Caleb asked. That man on the porch was watching. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment. "Some people are afraid," he said. "Some people think it's not their problem." Naomi's voice shook. "But it was our problem." "Yes," Marcus said quietly. "It was." That night, Naomi asked to sleep with the hallway light on. Caleb asked if the police could come to the house again. Marcus answered both questions with reassurances that felt thin even as he spoke them. After they were asleep, Marcus sat on the edge of his bed and stared at his phone. 3 missed calls. 2 texts. "You okay?" Saw something on the neighborhood group chat. He opened the app he'd been avoiding. The words scrolled past like a script he'd read too many times before. He should have complied. Kids shouldn't be out that late anyway. Officers have a tough job. Marcus set the phone down face first. In the morning, Naomi moved slower than usual. She asked Marcus to walk her to the bus stop, even though she hadn't needed that in over a year. Caleb didn't bring his toy gavel with him to school. At pickup, the looks came. Some parents smiled too wide. Others looked away. One woman leaned over and whispered, "That must have been so scary," in a tone that asked for gratitude instead of accountability. At home, Naomi dropped her backpack and went straight to her room. "Naomi," Marcus called, "homework first." She didn't answer. He found her sitting on the floor, knees pulled to her chest. "They asked me about it," she said. "Who?" "Kids," she replied. "They said their parents saw you get arrested." "I wasn't arrested," Marcus said automatically. Naomi looked up at him. They don't know that. Marcus sat beside her. What did you say? I said you didn't do anything, she said. But they said if the police put cuffs on you, you must have. Marcus felt something twist in his chest. He wanted to tell her about probable cause, about the difference between detention and arrest, about how perception wasn't proof. Instead, he said, I'm proud of you. She didn't smile. That evening, Marcus received the call he'd been expecting and dreading. This is Officer Reynolds from Internal Affairs. The voice said, professional and distant. We received your complaint. Yes, Marcus said. We'll need you to come in and give a statement. Reynolds continued. Just routine. Will the officer be placed on leave? Marcus asked. A pause. Not at this time. Why not? We haven't established misconduct. Marcus laughed once, a short sound with no humor. You haven't asked my children what they saw. Another pause. Longer. Sir, Reynolds said, this is a formal process. I'm aware, Marcus replied. I make a living inside formal processes. Silence. Reynolds cleared his throat. We'll be in touch. After the call, Marcus stood in the living room, hands on hips, breathing through anger that had nowhere to go. Caleb watched him from the couch. Are they going to say sorry? Marcus swallowed. I don't know. Caleb nodded slowly. If they don't, he said, does that mean they're right? Marcus crossed the room and knelt in front of him. No, he said firmly. It means they're wrong and not ready to admit it. Caleb considered this. Is that like when I don't say sorry because I'm embarrassed? Marcus almost smiled. Something like that. Later that night, Marcus opened his briefcase for the first time since the stop. Inside were printed drafts for an upcoming Supreme Court filing. Arguments about equal protection, about how the law must apply evenly or not at all. He read the words with new eyes. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance. Naomi stirred in her sleep. Marcus closed the briefcase and sat in the dark, understanding something he had always known but never felt so personally. His children were learning the rules of the world, and the world was teaching them back. The building smelled like disinfectant and old paper. Marcus noticed at the moment he stepped inside Internal Affairs. The sterile sharpness meant to suggest cleanliness, neutrality, order. It reminded him of hospitals and court archives, places where pain was processed quietly, efficiently, and often without witnesses. The waiting area was empty except for a flickering television mounted too high on the wall. A morning news anchor spoke about traffic delays and weather patterns, her smile fixed, untouchable. Marcus checked the clock. 10 minutes early. He sat anyway. Across from him, a poster read, Integrity is our commitment. He wondered who it was written for. Mr. Hale? A man called. Marcus stood. Officer Reynolds was exactly what Marcus had imagined, mid-40s. Average build, careful posture. His handshake was firm but brief, as if warmth might compromise something. Thank you for coming in, Reynolds said, already walking. They moved down a narrow hallway into a small interview room. A table, 2 chairs, a recorder in the center, blinking red. Reynolds gestured. Have a seat. Marcus Saturday, before we begin, he said, I want to be clear that my children were present during the incident. Reynolds nodded without writing it down. Yes, you mentioned that in your complaint. And that matters, Marcus added. Reynolds clicked the recorder on. Please state your name for the record. Marcus Elijah Hale. Reynolds folded his hands. Tell me, in your own words, what happened. Marcus did. He described the stop, the flashlight, the questions that weren't questions, the comment about teaching his kids how to get away with things. He described Naomi's crying, Caleb's silence, the weight of the cuffs. Reynolds listened, occasionally nodding, occasionally interjecting with clarifications that felt more like edits. So the officer never explicitly used racial language. Reynolds said at one point. No, Marcus replied. He didn't need to. Reynolds made a note. And you did not physically resist. No, you complied with all commands. Yes. Reynolds leaned back. Then you understand why this may be viewed as a lawful stop. Marcus felt a familiar pull of argument rise in his chest. He kept his voice level. Lawful doesn't mean just. Reynolds hesitated. We deal with policy, Mr. Hale. And policy, Marcus said, doesn't exist in a vacuum. The recorder hummed between them. After an hour, Reynolds turned it off. We'll review the dashcam footage, he said. We'll interview the officer. And my children? Marcus asked. Reynolds offered a thin smile. We don't usually involve minors. Marcus stood. Then you'll miss the truth. Outside, the sun felt too bright. Marcus sat in his car for several minutes before starting the engine. By the time he got home, the email had already arrived. Subject: follow-up, Internal Affairs Complaint Body. At this time, no policy violations have been identified. Marcus read it twice. Then a third time. Naomi was at the kitchen table, drawing. The page showed a stick-figure family under a square sun. To the side, a car with flashing lights. Daddy, she said without looking up, are you in trouble? No, Marcus said. Why? Mrs. Turner asked me if you were. Naomi replied. She said sometimes adults don't tell kids the whole story. Marcus felt heat rise in his face. What did you say? I said you tell the truth. Naomi said, even when it's hard. Marcus swallowed. That's right. That night, Marcus drafted a response he never sent. He deleted sentences that sounded too angry, too legal, too tired. Instead, he called a colleague. They're stonewalling, Marcus said. The voice on the other end sighed. Of course they are. So what's next? Pressure, the colleague replied. Light. Marcus looked toward the hallway where his children slept. At what cost? There was a pause. You know the answer to that. The next morning, a patrol car idled at the end of the block longer than usual. Marcus noticed. His neighbors noticed. On his way to work, he was followed for 3 turns before the car peeled off. At the office, a junior associate knocked on his door. There's a reporter on line 2. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. From where? Local news, the associate said. She says she has video. Marcus's breath caught. What video? The stop, she said. Dash cam. The newsroom was louder than he expected. Phones rang. Screens glowed. The reporter, a woman with sharp eyes and a careful voice, sat across from him. We obtained footage through a public records request, she said. The department declined to comment. She slid a tablet toward him. Marcus watched. The angle was wrong, distant. The audio crackled, but the words were there. The tone, the pause before the cuffs. He watched Naomi's door open a crack. He watched himself speak calmly. He watched the officer smirk. When it ended, Marcus didn't speak. This doesn't look good, the reporter said. For whom? Marcus asked. She met his gaze. That depends. By evening, the clip was everywhere. Comment sections bloomed with certainty. Why didn't he just cooperate? I'd be scared too if I were the officer. Those poor kids. The department released a statement just before midnight. We are aware of the video and are reviewing the matter. The officer involved acted within departmental guidelines. Marcus read it while sitting on the floor outside Naomi's room. Daddy, she whispered through the door. Yes. Are they going to believe you? Marcus leaned his head against the wall. Some will. And the ones who don't. Marcus closed his eyes. Then we keep going. On the other side of the city, Officer Daniel Crowley sat in his apartment, scrolling through his phone. He watched the video once. Then again, his jaw tightened. They always cut it wrong, he muttered. He opened a beer and turned up the volume on the television, drowning out the sound of his own voice, saying things he had never imagined would matter. Marcus stood in the dark hallway, the glow of his phone lighting his hands. For the first time since the stop, he understood something with absolute clarity. This was no longer about a report. It was about a record. And records, once written, did not forget. The courtroom had always felt like a sanctuary to Marcus. Not the grand marble kind people imagine when they heard the word. No columns or sweeping staircases. But the quiet rooms where arguments lived and died on the strength of language. Rooms where rules were supposed to mean something. Where facts were not suggestions. That morning, the sanctuary felt thin. Marcus stood at the sink in his office restroom, splashing cold water on his face. The mirror showed a man who looked composed enough. Tie straight, jacket press, but his eyes carried something unsettled, like he had walked into a familiar house and found the furniture rearranged. In the hallway outside, associates moved with purposeful speed. Someone laughed. Phones rang. Life continued with a confidence Marcus no longer trusted. Marcus, a voice called. He turned. Judge Ellen Whitaker, retired now, but still formidable, stood with a folder tucked under her arm. She had mentored him years ago, taught him how to strip emotion from an argument without losing its soul. "I saw the footage," she said without preamble. Marcus nodded. "Then you know why I didn't want you to." She studied him. "You okay?" The question was simple. The answer wasn't. "I'm functional," Marcus said. She sighed. "That's not what I asked." Marcus considered lying. He had done it before, even to himself. Instead, he said, "I'm angry in places I usually keep quiet." Whitaker nodded. "That'll happen when the law fails you in public." They walked together toward the conference room. Inside, a group of attorneys waited, files open, pens ready. Today's agenda: final review of a constitutional argument Marcus had shaped for months. An argument about equal protection, about the danger of discretion untethered from accountability. The irony pressed against his ribs. As Marcus spoke, his voice did what it always did, steady, precise. He walked them through precedent, through logic, through the careful architecture of persuasion. Heads nodded, notes were taken. But beneath the words, another scene played, a hood warm under his palms, a flashlight lingering too long, his daughter's voice breaking. "Marcus," someone said. He blinked. "Yes." "You okay with his phrasing?" an associate asked, pointing to a paragraph. "It assumes good faith." Marcus stared at the line. "Assuming good faith on the part of the state." He felt something shift. "Change it," Marcus said. "To what?" "Remove the assumption," he replied. "Let the burden speak for itself." No one argued. After the meeting, Marcus sat alone in his office. He opened a drawer he rarely touched and pulled out an old photograph. It showed him years earlier, younger, standing on the steps of a courthouse with his father. His father's hand rested on Marcus's shoulder. His smile was tired but proud. "You remember what I told you?" His father had said that day. Marcus remembered. The law is a promise. His father had said, but promises only matter if someone's willing to demand they be kept. His father had believed that. Marcus had built a life around it. Now, the promise felt conditional. At lunch, Marcus didn't eat. He scrolled through messages instead. Some were supportive, others weren't. A former classmate wrote, "Man, this blew up. You sure you want to push it?" Marcus typed deleted, then set the phone aside. He left work early and drove to the courthouse downtown. Not to file anything, not to argue, just to sit. The building loomed the way it always had, indifferent and immense. Inside, security waved him through with a nod of recognition. No questions, no suspicion. The contrast burned. Marcus sat in the back of an empty courtroom and listened to the silence. He imagined Naomi sitting where jurors sat, Caleb standing where defendants stood. He imagined explaining to them why the same badge meant different things in different places. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. "This is the clerk from the Supreme Court chambers. Justice Alvarez would like a word." Marcus closed his eyes. The call was brief, professional. "We're aware of the situation," the clerk said. "The justice wanted you to know your work is valued." Marcus thanked him. He ended the call and stared at the wooden bench in front of him. Valued. The word felt careful. Apolitical. Safe. That evening at home, Marcus found Naomi sitting on the floor with a stack of papers. "What are those?" he asked. She looked up. "Your papers." He crouched. "Where did you get them?" "Your briefcase," she said. "I was looking for a pencil." Marcus smiled faintly. "And they're about rules," she said. "But the rules didn't help you." Marcus sat beside her. "Sometimes rules take time." Naomi frowned. But he didn't wait. "No," Marcus said. He didn't. Caleb wandered in, holding his toy gavel. He set it on the coffee table and pushed it toward Marcus. I don't want it, Caleb said. Marcus picked it up. The plastic felt lighter than it used to. Why not? Caleb shrugged. Gavels are for people who listen. Marcus felt a tightness in his throat. He didn't fight. That night, he dreamed of courtrooms with no doors, of arguments spoken into empty air, of his father standing just out of reach, shaking his head, not in disappointment, but in warning. He woke before dawn. At his desk, Marcus opened a new document. Not a brief, not a complaint, a record. He wrote what had happened, not in legal language, but plain, deliberate sentences. He wrote about Naomi's tears, about Caleb's silence, about the way authority moved without explanation. He didn't name the officer. He didn't soften the truth. When he finished, the sky outside had begun to lighten. Marcus read the document once, then saved it. In the quiet, he understood something that frightened him more than the stop itself. The law had always been his shield. Now, it would have to become his weapon. And weapons, once raised, changed the shape of everything that followed. Marcus woke to the sound of his phone vibrating against a nightstand. Once, twice, then again insistently. He didn't need to look to know something had shifted. By the time he sat up, the screen was already lit with notifications stacked like dominoes mid-fall. Missed calls, messages, headlines truncated just enough to feel ominous. Local attorney speaks out after traffic stop video. Raises questions about police conduct. Marcus rubbed his eyes and swung his legs onto the floor. From the hallway came the low hum of the heater and the soft rhythm of Naomi's sleep. Caleb's door was cracked open, light spilling from the nightlight Marcus had plugged in himself. He stepped into the kitchen and opened his laptop. The video was everywhere now. Different angles. Slowed down. Zoomed in. Subtitled. Someone had isolated the audio where the officer's voice dropped, sharpened. Someone else had clipped Naomi's cry, looping it under a headline that read, Children watch as father detained. Marcus closed the laptop. It didn't help. At 8:30, his phone rang again. This is Rachel Lynn with Channel 7. The voice said briskly, We'd like to get your response to the department's statement. What statement? Marcus asked. She inhaled. They confirmed the officer's name. Marcus felt his stomach drop. They did what? They released it late last night, Rachel said. Officer Daniel Crowley, 12 years on the force. No disciplinary action currently on record. Marcus leaned against the counter. That's not accurate. Rachel hesitated. You're saying there's a record? I'm saying there are complaints, Marcus replied. They just weren't acted on. There was a pause, then the sound of typing. Would you be willing to speak on camera? Marcus glanced down the hallway. Not today. Understood, Rachel said, but this is moving fast. After the call, Marcus sat at the table and stared at the grain in the wood until it stopped blurring. By the time Naomi came out for breakfast, the story had reached national feeds. She looked at Marcus's phone face down on the table. Is it happening again? Yes, Marcus said, but differently. Caleb climbed onto his chair and squinted at the television, playing muted news in the corner. He pointed. That's you. Marcus reached for the remote and turned it off. We don't need to watch that. But they're talking about it, Caleb said. That means they saw. Marcus nodded. They did. At school drop-off, a line of cameras waited across the street. Marcus kept his head down, Naomi's hand tight in his, Caleb walking close enough to brush his leg. A woman called out, Sir, do you think this is about race? Marcus didn't stop walking. He didn't answer. Inside the building, the principal pulled him aside. We'll keep an eye on things, she said gently. If the kids need space. They need normal, Marcus replied. As much as possible. She nodded. Of course. At the office, Marcus found his colleagues unusually quiet. Conversations hushed as he passed. Someone offered him coffee, without meeting his eyes. Judge Whitaker knocked on his door, without waiting for an answer. They've opened a review, she said. Internal? Marcus asked. For now. Marcus laughed under his breath. For now. Whitaker crossed her arms. You knew this would happen. I knew something would, Marcus said. I didn't know it would feel like this. She studied him. They're not used to being seen. Neither was he. By noon, a second video surfaced. This one wasn't dash cam. It was body cam. From another stop, 2 years earlier. Officer Crowley again. Another black driver. Different street. Same tone. The caption read, Pattern? Marcus watched the clip once, then shut it off. His phone rang. This is Deputy Commissioner Harris. The voice said, smooth and practiced. We'd like to sit down and discuss your concerns. When? Marcus asked. Soon, Harris replied, before things escalate further. Marcus exhaled slowly. That depends on what you mean by escalate. There was a pause. Media attention can complicate matters. So can silence, Marcus said. The call ended politely, with nothing resolved. That afternoon, Marcus picked up Naomi early. She sat in the car with her backpack on her lap, eyes fixed forward. They showed it in class. She said, quietly. Showed what? Marcus asked, though he already knew. The video, Naomi replied. A boy pulled it up on his phone. Marcus gripped the steering wheel. What did you do? I told him to stop, she said. He said my dad was famous. Marcus swallowed. How did that make you feel? Naomi shrugged, but her voice trembled, like I wanted to disappear. At home, Caleb asked if the police officer was going to jail. I don't know, Marcus said honestly. That's not fair, Caleb said. No, Marcus agreed. It isn't. As night fell, Marcus stood on the porch and watched the news van idle at the corner. The streetlights hummed. A neighbor waved awkwardly, unsure. His phone buzzed a message from an unfamiliar number. You should have stayed quiet. Marcus stared at the screen. Inside, Naomi laughed suddenly at something on her tablet. Too loud, too forced. Caleb built towers from blocks and knocked them down again and again. Marcus stepped back into the house and locked the door. Across the city, Officer Crowley sat at his kitchen table, watching his name scroll across a ticker at the bottom of the screen. He muted the television. They don't know the whole story, he said to no one. His phone rang. He didn't answer. Marcus sat at his desk late into the night, reading reports that had finally surfaced. Complaints marked unfounded. Stops labeled routine. Names blurred together, but the language stayed the same. He thought of Naomi's words. Like I wanted to disappear. Marcus opened the document he'd started days earlier. He added a new line at the top. This is not an incident. It is a pattern. Outside, the news van's engine shut off. The exposure had done its work. And Marcus knew, with a clarity that settled deep in his bones, that there would be no returning to anonymity. Once the light was on, it demanded an ending. The pressure didn't arrive all at once. It seeped in. Marcus noticed it first in the small disruptions, the way his calendar invites disappeared and reappeared with no explanation, the way a parking ticket appeared on his windshield for a violation he knew he hadn't committed, the way a patrol car idled across from his house every morning at exactly 7:10, engine running, lights off. Naomi noticed it too. Why is that car always there? She asked one morning, cereal spoon hovering midair. Marcus kept his tone light. Coincidence. She nodded, but she didn't believe him. At school, the attention sharpened. Teachers were kind, but cautious, as if kindness itself were political. Naomi stopped raising her hand. Caleb started asking to stay home, complaining of stomach aches that vanished by afternoon. Marcus received an anonymous email at work. Subject, friendly advice. Body, you're a smart man. Don't burn everything you've built. He deleted it, then recovered it, then forwarded it to a secure folder labeled Timeline. At the office, a partner pulled him aside. We're behind you, she said. Just be aware. Of what? Marcus asked. Of how this looks, she replied. To donors, to clerks, to people who don't like controversy near the court. Marcus smiled thinly. The Constitution is controversial now. She didn't answer. That afternoon, Marcus found his car, door ajar in the garage. Nothing was missing. Nothing was damaged, but the message was unmistakable. That night, Naomi couldn't sleep. She stood in Marcus's doorway, clutching her pillow. "What if they're mad at you?" Marcus sat up. "Some people are," he said, "but that doesn't mean we did anything wrong." Naomi hesitated. "What if they take you away again?" Marcus pulled her into his arms. He wanted to promise her certainty. He couldn't. "They won't," he said instead, because she needed to hear it. At 2:13 a.m., Marcus's phone rang. A known number. He let it go to voicemail. The message was wordless, just breathing, slow, deliberate. Marcus saved it. The next day, Internal Affairs released a preliminary finding. No violation of policy at this time. Review ongoing. The phrasing was surgical. It closed doors without appearing to. On social media, the response split cleanly. Witch hunt. Accountability at last. Why now? A cable news host questioned Marcus's motives. "Is this about justice?" the host asked the camera. "Or ambition?" Marcus watched the clip, without sound. At school pickup, a boy shoved Naomi in line. "My dad says your dad hates cops," the boy said. Naomi shoved back. The school called Marcus within the hour. "She's not usually like this," the counselor said apologetically. "I know," Marcus replied. At home, Naomi refused dinner. "I don't want to go back," she said. "Everyone looks at me." Marcus sat across from her. "Do you want to talk about it?" She shook her head. "Talking doesn't make it stop." Caleb stopped building towers. He lined his blocks in rows instead, rigid, precise. If one fell, he started over. Marcus recognized behavior. Control where you can. Order as defense. That evening, Marcus met with Deputy Commissioner Harass downtown. The office was immaculate, the view expansive. "We value community trust," Harass said, hands folded. "We're concerned the situation is eroding it." "Then address the cause," Marcus replied. Harass smiled. "We are. You're protecting the department," Marcus said, "not the public." Harass leaned back. "Be careful with accusations, Mr. Hale." Marcus met his gaze. "Be careful with inaction." After the meeting, a man approached Marcus in the lobby. "You should think about your kids," the man said quietly. "No badge, no name." "I do," Marcus replied. "Constantly." The man nodded once and walked away. That night, Marcus sat at his desk and reread the Supreme Court brief he was scheduled to submit the following week. He imagined the headlines if he withdrew, the quiet relief it would bring. He imagined Naomi's face if he did. His phone buzzed. "Rachel Lynn. We confirmed 3 prior complaints against Crowley. Want to go on record?" Marcus typed. Deleted. Typed again. "Marcus. Yes, but it's not about him." "Rachel. Then what is it about?" Marcus stared at the screen. Marcus. The system that keeps him safe. Within hours, a new story broke. Pattern emerges in officer's history. Records show. The department responded with a warning about misleading narratives. The patrol car stopped idling across from Marcus's house the next morning. Instead, a notice arrived. "City code violation. Overgrown lawn." Marcus laughed once, sharp and incredulous. Naomi heard it from her room. "What's funny?" "Nothing," Marcus said. "Something." Caleb placed his toy gavel back on the table. "I think people listen sometimes," he said. Marcus picked it up and turned it over in his hands. The crack along the handle was deeper now. That afternoon, Marcus received a call from the clerk again. "Justice Alvarez wants to know if you're still comfortable filing," the clerk said carefully. Marcus didn't hesitate. "Yes." There was a pause. "Understood." After the call, Marcus stepped outside. The sun was setting, the street quiet. For the first time in weeks, there were no cars watching. He knew better than to think that meant safety. Retaliation didn't always roar. Sometimes it waited, and Marcus understood now that every step forward would invite resistance, not because he was wrong, but because he was close. Close enough to make them afraid. He went back inside and locked the door, the sound solid and final. Tomorrow, there would be consequences. But tonight, He sat with his children on the living room floor, building something fragile and necessary out of blocks and patience. Resistance, he realized, didn't always look like shouting. Sometimes it looked like staying. The hearing room was colder than Marcus expected. Not physically, though the air conditioning hummed with an overzealous chill, but in the way sound behaved, flattened and stripped of warmth. Even whispers felt exposed. The city seal loomed behind the raised dais, its symbols carved into permanence: balance, authority, order. Marcus sat at the long table with his hands folded, fingers interlaced the way he did when he needed stillness. Across from him, Officer Daniel Crowley sat beside a union attorney, shoulders squared, jaw tight. Crowley didn't look at Marcus. He stared straight ahead, like eye contact itself was a concession. The room filled slowly. Reporters, observers, a few uniformed officers standing along the walls, arms crossed, faces unreadable. Marcus felt their presence like pressure against his back. Naomi and Caleb were not there. That had been Marcus's condition. When the panel entered, 3 members, appointed, insulated, the room rose and fell again into silence. This hearing concerns allegations of misconduct. The chairwoman began, voice neutral, practiced. We will proceed in order. The department spoke first. They framed the stop as routine, emphasized officer safety, used words like perception and misunderstanding. They played the dash cam footage without sound, freezing frames where Marcus's hands were visible, compliant. Crowley's attorney spoke next. My client acted within training, he said. He followed protocol under uncertain circumstances. Marcus listened without interruption. He had argued cases built on thinner logic. When it was his turn, Marcus stood. He did not begin with law. He began with a story. My daughter is 9, he said. His voice carried easily, steady but unadorned. She knows the sound of a patrol car slowing down. She learned it before multiplication tables. There was a murmur in the room. My son is 6, Marcus continued. He used to play courtroom. He used to believe that gavels meant fairness. He doesn't play anymore. Crowley shifted. Marcus looked at the panel. You've seen the footage. You've heard the policy. What you haven't heard is what it teaches. The chairwoman leaned forward slightly. Mr. Hale, please confine your remarks to... This is a remark, Marcus said gently. This is the point. He described the stop again, not as an incident, but as a sequence. How assumptions stacked. How tone escalated without cause. How authority moved without explanation. I complied, Marcus said, not because I was guilty, but because I was afraid of what noncompliance would cost my children. He paused. That fear is not accidental, he said. It is cultivated. Crowley's attorney objected. Speculation. Marcus turned to him. Pattern, he said. Documented. The panel allowed him to continue. Marcus referenced the prior complaints, dates, locations, outcomes. He did not raise his voice. He did not accuse. He laid facts down like stones. This is not about one officer's character, Marcus said. It's about a system that treats accountability as optional when the subject wears a badge. When Marcus sat, the room was silent. Then Crowley stood. I did my job, Crowley said. His voice was tight, defensive. I didn't know who he was. Marcus looked up. That, he said quietly, is the problem. The panel called a recess. In the hallway, reporters crowded, microphones raised like weapons. Marcus ignored them. He stepped into a corner and pressed his back against the wall, breathing slowly. Judge Whitaker appeared beside him. You did well, she said. Marcus nodded. I told the truth. That's rarer than it should be, she replied. Across the hall, Crowley spoke in hushed tones with his attorney. His face was flushed now, eyes darting. The hearing resumed with questions. Officer Crowley, a panelist asked, why did you escalate the stop? Crowley hesitated. I perceived a threat. What threat? The panelist pressed. Crowley's mouth opened, then closed. His demeanor. Marcus felt the weight of the word. My demeanor, he repeated softly when asked to respond. Which part? The calm? The compliance? Or the refusal to perform fear? The panelists wrote something down. After hours of testimony, the chairwoman cleared her throat. "This panel will deliberate," she said. "Findings will be issued." The gavel struck once. Marcus flinched before he could stop himself. Outside, the sky had darkened. Naomi and Caleb waited in the car with Marcus's sister, who hugged him tightly when he approached. "How did it go?" she asked. Marcus exhaled. "We'll see." Naomi leaned forward from the back seat. "Did you tell them?" "Yes," Marcus said. "I told them." That night, Marcus tucked his children into bed. "Did they listen?" Caleb asked. "I think some of them did," Marcus replied. Naomi studied his face. "Is that enough?" Marcus brushed her hair back. "Sometimes it's a start." After they were asleep, Marcus sat alone on the couch. The house was quiet again, but this time it didn't feel hollow. His phone buzzed. "Rachel Lynn." Sources say the panel is split. Marcus typed back, "Marcus." Then they're honest. He set the phone aside. In the dark, Marcus replayed the hearing, not with dread but with clarity. He had stood in a room designed to minimize voices like his and spoken anyway. Whatever came next, that could not be undone. The law, he knew now, was not just a promise written in books. It was a demand, and today he had made it aloud. The findings arrived on a Wednesday morning, folded into an email subject line that tried to sound neutral. Panel determination, officer conduct review. Marcus didn't open it right away. He stood at the kitchen window, coffee cooling in his hand, watching Naomi tie her shoes with exaggerated care. Caleb sat on the floor lining up his blocks, counting under his breath. Ordinary motions. Fragile peace. "Dad," Naomi said, glancing up, "are you leaving early again?" "Yes," Marcus replied, "but I'll be back." She nodded, accepting the promise the way she had learned to, carefully but hopeful. When the door closed behind them, Marcus sat and opened the email. The words were precise, controlled. They did not use the language he wanted, racism, bias, harm, but they used words that mattered where it counted. Failure to de-escalate, improper use of discretion, conduct unbecoming an officer. Officer Daniel Crowley was placed on indefinite suspension pending termination proceedings. Mandatory review of departmental stop-in search protocols would follow. An external monitor would be appointed. Marcus exhaled, a long breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. It wasn't victory, but it was consequence. At City Hall, cameras crowded the steps. The mayor stood at a podium flanked by officials who looked uncomfortable in daylight. "We take these findings seriously," the mayor said. "We are committed to rebuilding trust." Marcus watched from the edge of the crowd. Rachel Lynn beside him, notebook closed. "Anything you want to say?" she asked. Marcus shook his head. "Not yet." Inside the department, reactions were immediate and uneven. The union released a statement condemning the decision as politically motivated. Officers gathered in small knots, some angry, some relieved, some silent. Crowley cleaned out his locker under supervision. He moved slowly, like each item weighed more than it should. Badge, cap, a folded photo of his kids at the beach. A younger officer watched from the doorway, eyes uncertain. "You think this is fair?" Crowley asked, not looking up. The younger officer hesitated. "I think it's complicated." Crowley snorted. "Yeah, that's what they say when it's not happening to them." He handed over his key and walked out without looking back. At school, Naomi heard the news before Marcus could tell her. They said on the announcements, she said when he picked her up, that the officer got in trouble. Marcus nodded. He did. Naomi considered this. Does that mean he knows it was wrong? Marcus paused. It means the system admitted something it usually doesn't. That he hurt people? She asked. Yes, Marcus said. That. Caleb climbed into the car and buckled himself. Is he going to say sorry? Marcus didn't answer right away. I don't know. That evening, a letter arrived by courier. Thick envelope, official seal. Marcus opened it at the table while the kids worked on homework. It was from the city's legal department. A settlement offer, measured, conditional, carefully worded. No admission of wrongdoing. Financial compensation earmarked for educational support. Marcus folded the letter once, then again. Naomi looked up. "What is it?" "An offer," Marcus said. "To make it go away?" she asked. Marcus met her eyes. "To make it quieter." Caleb frowned. "Do we want quiet?" Marcus smiled faintly. "Sometimes. Not today." He declined the offer the next morning. The backlash came quickly. Op-eds questioned his motives. Talk radio hosts painted him as ungrateful, opportunistic. A commentator sneered. If it was really about justice, wouldn't he take the help? Marcus didn't respond. Instead, he went to community center on Maple Street, where a meeting had been scheduled long before the findings were released. Parents filled the folding chairs. Teenagers leaned against the walls. A few officers stood near the back, hands clasped. Marcus spoke plainly. "This wasn't about me," he said. "It was about what our kids are taught when authority goes unchecked." A woman raised her hand. "What happens now?" Marcus didn't pretend certainty. "Now we watch what they do next." The external monitor was appointed within a week. Training protocols were revised. Body cam footage review expanded. None of it felt dramatic. All of it mattered. Crowley filed an appeal. It failed. On the day the termination was finalized, Marcus received a message from an unfamiliar number. "Daniel Crowley, I lost my job." Marcus stared at the screen. Another message followed. "I still don't think I did anything wrong." Marcus typed, then erased. Typed again. "Marcus." Then this will keep happening. He sent it and put the phone down. That night, Caleb brought the toy gavel back out. "I think I won again," he said, placing it carefully on the table. Marcus picked it up, turning it over in his hands. The crack was still there, but it hadn't grown. "Why now?" Marcus asked. Caleb shrugged. "Because someone listened." Naomi leaned against Marcus's shoulder. "Not everyone," she said. "No," Marcus agreed. "But enough." Later, alone, Marcus stood in his study and looked at the framed copy of the Constitution on the wall. He had always seen it as text. Now he saw it as tension. The phone rang. This time, Marcus answered. "Justice Alvarez asked me to pass along a message. The clerk said, your filing was noted." Marcus closed his eyes. "Thank you." After the call, Marcus sat at his desk and opened the document he'd been building for months. The record. He added the findings, the reforms, the refusal of quiet. At the bottom, he wrote one final line. "Accountability is not vengeance. It is maintenance." Outside, the street was calm. No idling cars. No cameras. The world hadn't been fixed, but it had been moved. And Marcus knew, with a certainty earned the hard way, that movement, slow, contested, imperfect, was the only kind that lasted. The quiet returned in pieces. Not all at once. Not cleanly. It crept back into the house the way dust settled. Slow, uneven, impossible to notice until it was suddenly everywhere. Marcus learned to measure peace differently now, by absence rather than presence. No patrol car idling at dawn. No phone buzzing past midnight. No strangers lingering at the corner with cameras raised. Normal did not snap back into place. It had to be rebuilt. Naomi started sleeping with the hallway light off again. It took weeks. Marcus never mentioned it when he noticed. He simply paused outside her room one night and let himself breathe when he saw the darkness holding. Caleb brought his toy gavel to school for show and tell. "I'm going to be a judge," he announced to class. The teacher smiled uncertainly. "That's wonderful." When Marcus heard about it later, something loosened in his chest. At work, the attention faded from spectacle to footnote. Marcus's name still surfaced in articles and case notes, but now it was attached to language he recognized: precedent, impact, standard. He returned to the rhythms he had always trusted. Drafts revised at midnight, arguments refined until every word carried its weight. The Supreme Court, filing went through. No applause, no ceremony, just a ruling months later that cited language Marcus had helped shape, measured, careful, undeniable. He read it alone in his office and felt no triumph, only a steady sense of alignment, as if something fractured had been set back into place, not perfectly, but firmly enough to hold. The city implemented reforms slowly, with reluctance and resistance baked into every step. Training sessions were held, protocols updated, oversight expanded. Some officers resented it, others welcomed it quietly. Marcus attended one final community meeting before stepping back. He listened more than he spoke. When he did speak, it was not as a lawyer. "It shouldn't take this much," he said simply, "but it often does." A man in the back raised his hand. "Would you do it again?" Marcus thought of Naomi on the floor of her room, knees pulled to her chest, of Caleb lining up blocks in perfect rows, of his own hands on a hot hood. "Yes," Marcus said, "but I wish I didn't have to." On the anniversary of the stop, Marcus took the day off. He drove Naomi and Caleb to the park by the river, the one they used to visit before schedules grew complicated. The air smelled like water and grass. Children ran past them, unburdened. Naomi sat beside Marcus on a bench. "Do you still think about it?" she asked. "Yes," Marcus said, "but it doesn't owe me any more." She nodded, satisfied with the honesty. Caleb skipped stones at the water's edge. One bounced 3 times before sinking. "That one was good," Caleb said. Marcus smiled. It was. As the sun dipped lower, Marcus felt something he hadn't allowed himself in months. Fatigue without fear, the kind that came from effort completed, not danger anticipated. That night, after the kids were asleep, Marcus opened the drawer where he kept the old photograph of his father. He studied it again, longer this time. "I kept the promise," Marcus said aloud, unsure who he was speaking to. "I just learned what it costs." He placed the photo back and turned off the light. Across the city, Daniel Crowley drove a rideshare under a different name. He avoided certain neighborhoods, certain streets. He didn't talk about what had happened. Sometimes when he passed a patrol car, he felt a flicker of something, anger, loss, something unfinished. He never reached out again. Life did not balance itself neatly. Marcus understood that now. Justice, when it came, arrived without fireworks. It left scars where certainty used to be. It demanded endurance long after the headlines moved on. But it also left markers. Naomi spoke up in class when something felt wrong. Caleb argued rules with confidence again, less brittle now. And Marcus learned to carry the memory without letting it harden him. On a quiet evening months later, Naomi found the record Marcus had written, the one that had started everything. "Can I read this?" she asked. Marcus hesitated, then nodded. "If you want." She read slowly, carefully, as if the words mattered because they did. When she finished, she looked up. "This is sad." "Yes," Marcus said, "but it's also brave," she added. Marcus felt tears sting unexpectedly. He did not hide them. "Bravery," he said, "is just honesty with consequences." Naomi thought about that. "I think I can do that," she said. Marcus pulled her into a hug, holding on longer than usual. Outside, the neighborhood settled into night. Porch lights flickered on. Doors closed. Lives continued, imperfect and persistent. The gavel had fallen long ago, but its echo, soft, insistent, remained. Not as punishment, as reminder. That justice was not an ending. It was a practice. And for Marcus Hale, for his children, for anyone paying attention, it would have to be. Time did what it always did. It moved forward without permission. Marcus noticed a change first in the way people spoke to him again, not cautiously, not reverently, but ordinarily. Conversations returned to deadlines and weather and traffic. His name stopped trending. His face stopped appearing in thumbnails framed by outrage. The silence was not empty anymore. It was earned. On a crisp fall morning, Marcus walked Naomi to school without cameras trailing behind them. Leaves scraped along the sidewalk, bright and dry. Naomi carried her backpack on both shoulders now, no longer clutching it like a shield. "Dad," she said, kicking the leaf ahead of her, "do you think people forget things like this?" Marcus considered the question. "Some do," he said. "Some choose to." "And you?" "I remember," he replied, "but I don't relive it." Naomi nodded, satisfied with the distinction. At work, Marcus was asked to mentor a first-year clerk. Brilliant, nervous, careful in the way people were when they knew the stakes but not the terrain. During their first meeting, the clerk hesitated before speaking. "I watched everything unfold," she said. "I didn't know if I should mention it." "You can," Marcus said. "It's part of my resume now." She smiled uncertainly. "Did it change how you practice law?" Marcus leaned back in his chair. "It changed how I listen," he said, "and how long I'm willing to wait." The clerk nodded, writing that down as if it were doctrine. One evening, Marcus attended a small dinner hosted by Justice Alvarez. No press, no speeches, just conversation and clinking glasses. At one point, the justice met Marcus's gaze. "The law moves slowly," he said. "Sometimes too slowly." Marcus nodded. "But it moves." "Yes," Alvarez replied. "When pushed." They didn't say more than that. At home, Caleb's room had transformed. The blocks were still there, but now they shared space with books about planets and dinosaurs and, recently, government. Checks and balances. Caleb announced one night, flipping pages with solemn importance. "It means nobody gets all the power." Marcus smiled. "That's the idea." Caleb frowned. "Does it work?" Marcus hesitated. "Then it works when people care enough to make it." Caleb considered this deeply, then returned to his book. Naomi joined the debate team at school. The first time Marcus watched her argue a point, voice steady, chin lifted, he felt something tighten behind his ribs. Pride, yes, but also recognition. She was learning to stand without asking permission. Months later, Marcus received an invitation to speak at a law school symposium. The title made him wince slightly, justice in practice. When the system is tested, he accepted anyway. Standing at the podium, Marcus looked out at rows of students, young, idealistic, uncertain. He saw himself among them, years ago, believing clarity was enough. "I won't tell you the system is fair," Marcus said, "because you'll learn otherwise. What I will tell you is that it's responsive, not automatically, not evenly, but under pressure." A hand rose. "What do you do when the pressure costs too much?" Marcus paused. "You decide what you're willing to live with," he said, "and what you're not." After the applause faded, Marcus walked back to his car alone. The night air was cool, the city lights distant and steady. He thought of the version of himself on the side of the road, the man counting breaths, choosing calm over confrontation, survival over dignity, because dignity could be reclaimed later. He had been right, but he had also learned that reclamation required witnesses. Weeks later, Marcus ran into a neighbor he hadn't seen since the worst days. "I meant to say," the man began awkwardly. "I should have done more." That night, Marcus studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Maybe next time," he said. "You will." The man seemed relieved by the mercy of that answer. On the anniversary of the hearing, not the stop but the hearing, Marcus did something unexpected. He took the day off and did nothing remarkable. He cooked breakfast. He walked Naomi to school. He helped Caleb with a science project that ended in glue everywhere and laughter. That night, they sat together on the couch, legs tangled, a movie playing softly in the background. Naomi glanced at Marcus. "Do you think I'll have to do something like you did?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "I hope you won't," he said. "But if you do, you won't be alone." She leaned into him. "That helps." Later, when the house was quiet, Marcus opened the record one last time. He reread it not as evidence, but as memory. He added nothing. Some stories didn't need a final paragraph. He closed the file and archived it. Outside, the city breathed, sirens in the distance, traffic humming, life moving forward without asking who had paid what price. Marcus turned off the light and stood for a moment in the dark, unafraid. Justice, he knew now, was not a moment. It was a direction, and he had taught his children how to face it. Eyes open, voice steady, feet planted where they belonged. That, more than any ruling or reform, felt like the true measure of what had been won. The long view, Marcus understood at last, was not about seeing the end. It was about choosing, again and again, to keep walking toward it.